The screen fades in. I'm sitting at a cafe table, sunlight pouring through the windows. The clinking of mugs, the hum of conversations, the smell of roasted beans. It should feel warm and cozy. But in that moment, all I felt was the sting of humiliation. "Can't even buy a coffee," my cousin Rachel sneered, loud enough for the entire cafe to hear. Her voice cut through the air like broken glass. I froze, my hands wrapped tightly around my cup. The words stung, not because I hadn't heard worse from her before, but because of how casually she said them, like I was the family joke. Rachel leaned back in her chair, smirking, her manicured nails tapping against her phone screen. She always found a way to remind me of how little she thought of me. And this time, she didn't stop there. "Honestly, Amelia," she added, her eyes narrowing with mock pity, "I don't even know how you show your face at these family get-togethers. What are you doing with your life? Playing boss at some little startup? Meanwhile, real adults are out here buying houses, cars, and, at the very least, a decent cup of coffee." The words rolled off her tongue so smoothly as if she'd rehearsed them. My family chuckled awkwardly. No one defended me. My Uncle Greg, Rachel's biggest cheerleader, threw in his own jab. "She's not wrong. Amelia, I mean, come on, you're almost 30. Maybe it's time to face reality. Dreams don't pay the bills." My chest tightened, but I forced a smile. That's what I always did. Smile, stay quiet, and take it. Across the table, my younger brother Ethan avoided my eyes, pretending to scroll through his phone. He hated conflict. He wasn't going to step in. My father, Thomas, sat stiffly, his jaw clenched. He wanted to speak, I could tell, but he didn't. He'd already told me in private, "Amelia, we just want you to have stability. You can't keep chasing after something that may never work." Even my mother, Diane, who usually tried to soften the blows, just sighed and stirred her coffee. I knew what she was thinking. Why can't you just be normal, Amelia? Why can't you live a life that doesn't make us worry so much? For a moment, I wanted the ground to open and swallow me whole. Every eye at the table was either mocking me or silently agreeing with Rachel. And worst of all, strangers in the cafe had turned their heads. I could feel their eyes on me, pitying me, maybe even laughing at me. Rachel leaned forward, her voice a whisper but sharp enough to slice through me. "Don't take it personally. We just want you to grow up." That was it. That was the moment I realized she didn't see me as family, as someone trying, as someone worth respecting. She saw me as a failure. I swallowed hard, forcing myself not to react. If I argued, I'd look defensive. If I cried, I'd look weak. So I did what I always did. I stayed calm. I took a deep breath and held my head high, even as my insides twisted. I wanted to scream, "You don't know me. You don't know what I've built. You don't know how hard I've worked while you laughed at me." But I didn't, because deep down, I knew something they didn't. And in just a few minutes, they were about to find out. The tension was thick enough to choke on when my phone buzzed on the table. I glanced down. A simple message popped up. "Miss Cross, your car is ready." Chauffeur waiting outside, I blinked. Timing. Perfect, almost unreal. My pulse quickened, not from fear, but from anticipation. I looked up, and for the first time that day, I let a real smile touch my lips. They thought I couldn't buy a coffee. They thought I was broke, pathetic, chasing pipe dreams. But outside that cafe, a Rolls-Royce Phantom sat waiting for me. Not rented, not borrowed, mine. And when the suited driver walked in moments later, bowed slightly and said in a steady voice, "Your car is ready, ma'am," the entire cafe went silent. My family froze. Rachel's smirk fell like shattered glass. My Uncle Greg's jaw slackened. My father blinked as if he couldn't trust his own eyes. I stood slowly, every movement deliberate. My heels clicked against the cafe floor. I turned to my family, their eyes wide with disbelief, and I spoke just 2 words. "Pardon me." Then I walked out. And what happened after I drove off in that Rolls-Royce? That made them lose their minds. I'll be honest with you, family gatherings have never been easy for me. Every time I walk into one, I feel like I'm stepping onto a stage where I don't quite belong. Everyone else seems to know their roles. My cousin Rachel, the star of the show, plays the successful, confident woman with her flashy designer bags and constant commentary. Uncle Greg plays the comic relief, except his jokes are usually at my expense. My parents sit in the audience, clapping politely for everyone else, but always wincing when it comes to me. And me? I'm the black sheep, the quiet one, the dreamer who, in their eyes, never grew up. That morning, I had promised myself I wouldn't let it get to me. I'd woken up early, put on a cream blouse and a navy skirt, brushed my hair until it shined, and told myself, smile, stay calm. You know your truth. The cafe was warm and lively, filled with the smell of espresso and toasted bagels. People came and went, carrying paper cups, laughing into their phones, rushing off to their jobs. But for me, time slowed as soon as I spotted my family sitting near the window. There they were, Rachel already commanding the conversation with her laughter, Uncle Greg nodding along like her hype man, and my parents sitting stiffly, sipping their coffees as though they'd rather be anywhere else. Ethan, my younger brother, sat slouched with earbuds dangling from one ear, scrolling aimlessly through his phone. He noticed me first, gave me a quick smile, and that tiny gesture gave me the courage to walk over. Amelia! My mother, Diane, looked up, relief softening her features. She hugged me quickly, like she was grateful I hadn't skipped out. My father, Thomas, offered a nod, his eyes scanning me up and down as if checking whether I looked responsible enough today. Rachel smirked before I even sat down. Look who finally decided to join us. We were beginning to think you couldn't even afford brunch. The words rolled over me, sharp but predictable. That was Rachel. Every sentence had a barb in it. She thrived on putting people down, especially me. I ignored her and slid into my chair. The waiter came by and I ordered a simple cappuccino. That was enough to draw Rachel's raised eyebrows. Just coffee? She said, shaking her head dramatically. Well, I guess that fits. I could feel Uncle Greg grinning before he even spoke. Don't worry, Amelia. We'll cover you if it's too much. The table chuckled. My stomach nodded. My father cleared his throat, trying to steer the conversation elsewhere. So, Amelia, how's work? Are you making progress? Progress. That was his polite word for, are you failing again? He never said it outright, but I heard it in his tone. It's going well, I said simply, stirring my cappuccino. I've been busy. Rachel leaned forward, her chin resting on her palm. Busy with what, exactly? I mean, do you even make money yet? Or is this just another hobby phase? I swallowed hard. This was the routine. Every brunch, every dinner, every holiday, it always came down to the same interrogation. My career wasn't normal enough, not traditional enough, not impressive enough. To them, success meant a 9-to-5, a mortgage, and a predictable paycheck. But that wasn't me. I had spent years working quietly, pouring everything into a company I co-founded, sacrificing sleep, weekends, and even friendships. I hadn't told my family much about it, not because I was ashamed, but because I knew they wouldn't understand. To them, until money was in hand, until there was something flashy to show off, it wasn't real. Still, I smiled. It's more than a hobby, Rachel. Uncle Greg chuckled. Well, unless it pays for this coffee, I'm not convinced. Ethan shot me a sympathetic glance, but said nothing. He never did. My mother sighed and shook her head. She's trying, Greg. Let's not make this another argument, but it was too late. The air was already heavy. The conversation had shifted into familiar territory. Me, the family's favorite target. I sat there quietly, my cappuccino cooling in front of me, pretending their words didn't bother me, pretending I didn't care. But deep inside, I felt the sting of being dismissed, diminished, and doubted once again. And that's what made the moment later, when the driver pulled up outside with the Rolls-Royce, so much sweeter. Because in that instant, I wasn't the black sheep anymore. I was the wolf they never saw, coming. The cappuccino in front of me had gone lukewarm, but I kept stirring it anyway just to have something to do with my hands. The conversation had shifted, but only slightly. Rachel still had her eyes on me like a cat waiting for a mouse to twitch. I knew the next jab was coming. It always did. So, Amelia, she said, her voice sugary sweet, what exactly is it that you do all day? I mean, besides drinking coffee? Her laughter rang out across the table. Uncle Greg slapped his palm against the wood, joining in, and even a stranger 2 tables over glanced our way. Heat rose to my cheeks. I forced a polite smile. I work. A lot. On what? Rachel pressed, tilting her head like she was genuinely curious. but her eyes betrayed her. This wasn't curiosity. This was a performance. She wanted the audience, the whole cafe, to hear me stumble, to confirm her version of me as the family failure. "I run a business," I said evenly, keeping my voice steady. Rachel's eyebrows shot up. "A business? That's adorable. So what do you sell?" "Dreams. Because I don't see much else happening." Uncle Greg snorted into his coffee. My father shifted uncomfortably, rubbing his temples. My mother tried to shush Rachel with a look, but Rachel only leaned back in her chair, arms folded, basking in her own sarcasm. I could feel the cafe noise fading behind me, like I was underwater. Their laughter, their words, they pressed in from all sides. My father finally spoke, his tone heavy but calm. "Amelia, we're not trying to attack you. We want to understand. You've been at this for years, and we don't see results. We just want to know you'll be okay." There it was, the line I'd heard so many times. "We just want you to be okay." But it never sounded like concern. It always sounded like doubt. I set down my spoon carefully. "I am okay, Dad," Rachel scoffed. "If you were okay, you wouldn't still be living like a college kid. I mean, come on, no house, no real car. What do you even have to show for yourself?" The words cut deep because they were the very questions I asked myself late at night, and that was her talent. Rachel knew how to aim where it hurt most. "Rachel, that's enough," my mother said firmly, though her eyes flicked toward me with something that looked like disappointment more than defense. But Rachel only smirked, twirling a strand of hair around her finger. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking." The silence that followed was worse than her words, because no one disagreed. Ethan finally cleared his throat, his voice quiet but trembling with frustration. "You don't have to talk to her like that." Rachel turned on him instantly. "Oh, please. You're still in school. You don't even know what the real world is like. Stay out of this." Ethan sank back into his chair, cheeks red. My heart ached for him, but also for myself. Even the one person who tried to stand up for me was shut down. I looked at my family, my father's worried frown, my mother's pursed lips, Rachel's smug grin, Uncle Greg's amused smirk, and I felt the weight of years pressing down on me, years of being underestimated, years of my achievements being invisible because they didn't look like Rachel's. I wanted to scream, to shout that I wasn't some failure scraping by, that I had built something real, something valuable, that the only reason they didn't know about it was because I had stopped telling them, because every time I tried, they laughed, or worse, looked at me with pity. But I didn't scream. Instead, I leaned back, folded my hands in my lap, and said softly, "Maybe I don't need to prove anything to you." The words hung in the air. For a moment, no one knew what to say. Then Rachel laughed, sharp and cruel. "Oh, honey, you don't have anything to prove." She gestured to my half-empty coffee cup. "It's already obvious." The table erupted again in nervous chuckles. My chest tightened, but I kept my face calm. I had been through this dance before. I knew their script by heart, but this time something inside me shifted, because while Rachel thought she had won, while my uncle thought he'd gotten the last laugh, while my parents thought I had nothing left to defend, I knew something they didn't. My phone buzzed again in my purse, a reminder, right on time. I glanced down at the screen, my heart steadying. "Miss Cross, your car is ready." Chauffeur waiting outside, my lips curved into the faintest smile. They thought the joke was on me, but the curtain was about to rise on a scene none of them would ever forget. The cafe felt smaller by the minute, like the walls were closing in. Laughter from my cousin Rachel and Uncle Greg echoed in my head, but beneath it, I could hear my own heartbeat, slow, steady, deliberate. I had been here before, ridiculed and dismissed, but this time was different. This time, I had a choice. My phone screen still glowed in my lap, the message bold and clear. "Miss Cross, your car is ready." Chauffeur waiting outside, I slid it back into my purse, careful not to draw attention. No need for a dramatic announcement. Let them keep believing the version of me they'd built in their heads for just a few more minutes. I took another sip of my cappuccino, though it had gone cold. Rachel was still grinning, waiting for me to lash out to give her the satisfaction of seeing me crack. Uncle Greg leaned forward, ready to laugh at my expense again. My father tapped his finger on the table, restless, his patience wearing thin. My mother pursed her lips, silently begging me to say something safe, something small, something that wouldn't cause a scene. But inside, a quiet fire burned. I glanced at Ethan. He was watching me, his brow furrowed. He didn't say anything, but his eyes spoke. "Don't let them get to you." I gave him the faintest nod. Then I set down my cup, folded my napkin, and stood. "Excuse me for a moment," Rachel smirked. "What's the matter, Amelia? Finally had enough?" I ignored her and walked calmly toward the door, my heels clicking softly against the tile. Behind me, I heard chairs scraping, murmurs rising. They were curious. They couldn't help themselves. As I pushed the glass door open, the crisp air hit my face, and there it was, parked at the curb like something out of a dream, a black Rolls-Royce Phantom gleaming beneath the morning sun. The chrome grille caught the light, nearly blinding. A man in a tailored suit stepped forward immediately, his posture straight, his expression respectful. He opened the rear door and inclined his head. "Your car is ready, ma'am." His voice carried just enough to be heard by everyone lingering inside the cafe. I didn't need to turn around to know their jaws had dropped. The chatter behind me stilled into silence. Even the clinking of dishes inside seemed to pause. I walked toward the car, every step measured, every breath steady. For once, I wasn't shrinking under their stares. I was commanding them. Rachel's voice finally broke the silence, sharp and disbelieving. "Wait, what? That can't be yours." Her words trembled, though she tried to laugh them off. Uncle Greg stumbled out of the cafe doorway, eyes wide, his coffee cup forgotten on the table behind him. "Amelia, what in the world?" I turned then, slowly letting them take in the sight. The chauffeur holding the door open, the leather seats waiting inside, the quiet power of a car they'd only ever seen in movies. My father stood frozen just outside the door, his mouth opening and closing without sound. My mother had a hand over her chest, her eyes darting between me and the car like she couldn't decide which was more unreal. Ethan stood a little taller, his lips curving into the faintest smile. Rachel, though. Rachel looked as if someone had pulled the rug out from under her. Her face drained of color, her jaw tight, her arms wrapped defensively across her chest. I let the silence linger, let them feel it, let them sit in the weight of everything they thought they knew about me. Finally, I tilted my head, a small smile tugging at my lips. "Pardon me." 2 words, that was all. But the way they landed, it was like thunder. Then, without another glance, I slid gracefully into the car. The chauffeur closed the door behind me with a soft, decisive click. The engine purred to life, smooth and deep, and the Rolls-Royce pulled away from the curb. Through the tinted glass, I caught one last glimpse of my family standing there, silent, stunned, their disbelief painted across their faces. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like the black sheep. I didn't feel small. I felt powerful. I leaned back against the leather seat, exhaling slowly. The driver asked softly, "Where to, miss?" "Cross?" I gave the address of my company's headquarters, downtown, a high-rise with my name etched into the executive floor. As we merged into traffic, I thought of Rachel's sneer, my uncle's laughter, my father's doubts, my mother's sighs, and I realized this was the moment everything changed. Not because they saw the car, but because they finally saw me. The city blurred past the tinted windows as the Rolls-Royce glided through traffic. I sat back against the leather seats, my hands folded in my lap, and for the first time that morning, I allowed myself to breathe freely. The cafe was behind me. The sting of Rachel's mockery, Uncle Greg's laughter, even my parents' silent judgment, it all seemed small now. But the real moment hadn't even happened yet, because I knew what awaited me downtown. The driver pulled up to a glass high-rise that towered above the skyline, sleek and modern, its mirrored surface catching the light like a jewel. At the top, in silver letters, was the name of the company I had co-founded 6 years ago, Crestline Technologies. It wasn't a household name yet, but in the tech world it was quickly becoming one. And just last month, I had signed a deal with an international firm that valued our company in the tens of millions. My quiet sacrifices, my long nights, my years of being the failure of the family, they had built this. The Rolls stopped at the entrance. The driver stepped out and opened the door for me. Employees milling about outside looked up, some nodding respectfully, others whispering, "That's Miss Gorse, cross." I straightened my shoulders and walked inside. The marble floors gleamed beneath my heels. Security guards greeted me by name. An assistant hurried over with a folder of updates. "Morning, Miss Cross. Boardroom's ready when you are." I gave her a smile. "Thank you." As I moved through the lobby, I pulled out my phone. A string of missed calls and messages lit up the screen. My mother, my father, even Rachel. I didn't open them, not yet. Instead, I stepped into the elevator and rode up to the top floor. The doors opened to reveal a boardroom with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. My partners were already seated, discussing numbers, projections, strategies. They greeted me warmly, making space at the head of the table. And in that moment, I realized the true climax wasn't the car. It wasn't even the shocked looks on my family's faces. It was this, knowing that while they doubted me, I had been quietly building something they couldn't even imagine. That evening, when the meeting wrapped up and the city lights began to glow outside, I finally called my parents back. They answered on speakerphone. My father's voice came first, cautious, almost trembling. "Amelia, we saw the car. We didn't understand." My mother chimed in quickly, her voice softer than it had been in years. "Why didn't you tell us? Why keep this from us?" I hesitated, my hand resting on the polished table. Then I spoke. "Because every time I tried, you didn't listen. You didn't believe in me. You laughed, or you worried. And I got tired of proving myself to people who decided I would never measure up." There was silence on the other end. For once, no excuses, no interruptions. Then Rachel's voice cut in, sharp but shaken. "So, what, you're rich now? Is that it? You think money makes you better than us?" I let out a quiet laugh. "No, Rachel, money doesn't make me better, but it proves I wasn't failing. It proves I was building something when you thought I had nothing. And I don't need you to validate it." Uncle Greg's voice muttered in the background, but it was weak this time, uncertain. My father finally spoke again. We underestimated you." I closed my eyes, letting the words sink in, words I had waited years to hear. "I don't need your apology," I said gently, "but I do need you to understand. My life is mine. I won't live it for your approval anymore." There was no reply, only silence. But that silence carried something new. Respect, maybe even fear. I ended the call, set the phone down, and gazed out at the city lights. That morning, I had walked into a cafe as the family disappointment. By nightfall, I stood in a tower I helped build, my family finally forced to see me for who I was. Not a failure, not a joke, not the black sheep, but Amelia Cross, CEO. And that was the moment everything changed. The next morning, my phone didn't stop buzzing. Missed calls, voicemails, texts pouring in one after another. From my father, "We need to talk." From my mother, "Call me back, please." From Rachel, "So when were you planning on telling us? Or were we supposed to just look stupid forever?" For years, I had been the one chasing their approval. I had been the one shrinking at family dinners, bracing myself for the jokes, the smirks, the sighs. But now, for the first time, they were the ones scrambling for answers. I let the phone buzz. I had a full day ahead. Meetings, calls with investors, interviews lined up for the expansion we were planning. My life had changed long before they realized it. The only difference now was that the truth was out in the open. That evening, I finally went to see them. My parents had invited me over for dinner, and this time, their tone was different. There was no edge in their voices, no exasperation, just nervousness. When I walked into their house, the smell of roast chicken filled the air. My mother rushed to the door, pulling me into a hug so tight it almost startled me. "Amelia," she whispered, "why didn't you say something sooner?" I pulled back and looked at her, because every time I tried, no one wanted to listen. Her eyes welled with tears. My father, standing behind her, shifted uncomfortably but nodded. "She's right," he said quietly. We were too quick to judge. At the I table, the silence was different now, heavy, but not with judgment, with regret. Ethan was the first to speak. He grinned at me, genuine and proud. I knew you'd make it. I just didn't know how big it was. I smiled back at him. Bigger than I ever thought, too. Rachel wasn't smiling. She sat stiffly across from me, her arms folded tight across her chest. So you just kept this whole secret life from us? You let us think you were struggling when you were actually… whatever this is? Her voice cracked, just slightly. Beneath the anger, I heard something else. Hurt. Maybe even envy. I set my fork down and looked at her directly. Rachel, I didn't keep it from you to make you look foolish. I kept it to protect myself. Every time I tried to share, you mocked me. You wanted me small. So I stayed quiet and worked. For once, Rachel didn't have a comeback. She looked down, her cheeks flushed. Uncle Greg, who had joined us reluctantly, finally muttered, "Guess we owe you an apology." I shook my head. You don't owe me anything. I didn't do this to prove you wrong. I did it because I believed in myself when no one else did. The room fell silent again, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable. It was thoughtful. Later that night, as I drove home, I thought about the lesson in all of it. Success isn't about the car, or the high-rise office, or the money in the bank. Those things shocked them, sure. But what truly mattered was what it took to get there. The late nights, the failures, the endless rejections, the quiet perseverance when everyone else said, "Give up." The Rolls-Royce was just a symbol. The real victory was learning that I didn't need anyone's validation. And that's what I want you to take away from this story. You don't have to prove yourself to people who've already decided not to see your worth. Their doubt doesn't define you. Their laughter doesn't limit you. What matters is that you keep going, even when no one claps, even when no one believes. Because one day, the same people who doubted you will have no choice but to face what you've become. As I pulled into my driveway, I thought of Rachel's sneer, Uncle Greg's smirk, my parents' sighs. I thought of all the years I'd felt like the black sheep. And I smiled, because I wasn't the black sheep anymore. I was the one who had built something lasting, something real. That day at the cafe, they thought I couldn't even buy a coffee. But when I drove away, I left them with something money couldn't buy. The undeniable truth that they had been wrong about me all along. And the best part? I didn't need to rub it in. I just needed to keep moving forward, and that's my story. That day started with humiliation, with laughter at my expense, with people I loved making me feel small. But it ended with a truth none of them could ignore. That your worth isn't defined by who doubts you. It's defined by what you choose to build, even when no one's watching. If you've ever felt underestimated, judged, or laughed at, remember this: you don't need their approval to succeed. The best revenge is not revenge at all. It's living your life on your own terms, building something so undeniable that the world has no choice but to take notice. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever had a moment where people doubted you and then you proved them wrong? And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs encouragement. And of course, subscribe to the channel for more stories that will keep you inspired, entertained, and connected. Your support means everything. It's what helps me keep creating stories like this. So go ahead, like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, remember, never let anyone else write your story for you.